Welcome, everybody, to Darker Than Blue, your number one source for struggle, socialism, and soul. How y'all doing? Really glad to see you, hear you again this second Friday of our new show. We're just going to celebrate all month of our new show. Yay. Um, this is Jacquie Luqman. I am your host, along with Sean Blackmon. And Sean, the voice Blackmon, is not here tonight because we're organizers. He's doing what organizers do. He is organizing, helping to organize the March on Washington for Gaza tomorrow, convening at Freedom Plaza, I believe at 1 o'clock. So be there tomorrow, please. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Welcome to Friday the 12th. Darker Than Blue, and welcome to our special guest and my lovely, wonderful friend, Dr. Charisse Burden-Stelly, Associate Professor of African American Studies at Wayne State University, and author of the new book, which, if you are not reading it, you are missing out on some serious, serious context and grounding for what's going on right now. And the book is called Black Scare, Red Scare, Theorizing Capitalist Racism in the United States. Dr. Charisse Burden-Stelly, good to see you. Good to hear you.
Yes, good to see you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here and that you and Sean are back and better than ever.
Yeah, it was, a great surprise. And honestly, it was like a seamless transition, right? It was like, okay, this makes perfect sense. So yeah, we're very, very, very excited about this. And we really wanted to make sure that we stay on top of everything that is going on right now in the world, in this country, that really is connected to what we focus on: struggle, socialism, and obviously soul, and not just like in the context of soul music. That's a part of it a little bit, but just the idea of humanity, right? And how right now, I don't know how you feel, but it feels to me like humanity is in this monumental struggle. And I know that the Democrats always say this, like, oh, we're fighting for America's soul. I really feel like humanity in general is fighting for its soul right now. And I think a lot of that is playing out, obviously, in the hearings in the International Court of Justice, where South Africa has brought a case against a genocide case against Israel. The attorneys for South Africa spoke yesterday, and then the attorneys for Israel spoke today. And I saw a lot of people on my Facebook and Twitter timelines. "Oh, I'm going to do a drinking game for how many times they say Hamas," and I was like, "That's not a good idea. All of you all will have alcohol poisoning because that's." But
Exactly.
but have you watched the proceedings specifically today, and how do you feel about this hearing right now, and what it means, not just for whether the ICJ will come to a conclusion to charge Israel with genocide. I'm not holding my breath for anything right to happen, but how do you feel this hearing is fitting into the context of this massive struggle going on around the world against imperialism, against racialized capitalism, settler
Mhm.
colonialism, and really for people's liberty and for the soul of humanity, I guess.
Well, I feel many ways about it. So I must admit, I haven't been watching the whole thing. If people, I have a newborn baby, and so me and my partner we're fighting for our lives right now. But no, but I think that South Africa bringing Israel before the ICJ on the charge of genocide represents sort of the contradictions of not only the moment that we're in, but sort of what it means to really struggle for justice. Because on the one hand, we know these international institutions, not least the UN, really are puppets of imperialism, right? We only need to look at the UN and its central role in the occupation of Haiti, in sort of endorsing and pushing forth the core group, right? The UN peacekeeping troops that poisoned tens of thousands of people in Haiti with cholera, a few years ago. And so we know that these international bodies were created and sort of constituted by imperialist countries, right? So the UN was founded right after World War II, when the majority of the world was still under the colonial yoke. And so on the one hand, it shows a sort of baseless, I would say, faith in these international institutions to be representative of the people. At
Mhm.
the same, so that's one side of the contradiction. On the other hand, I think symbolically, it's actually really important because it's showing that the facade of Israel being the only democracy in the Middle East,
Mhm.
Israel supposedly having the right to defend itself, it shows the sort of that mythology has been wholly debunked since October 7th, if we ever believed it even before. So something I like to point out is that folks are just now talking about genocide with respects to Palestine. What we're seeing now is a war intensification of the genocide, but because genocide is among other things, the effort to destroy a people in whole or in part, this has been going on, one might argue since the Nakba, but at least since the blockade of Gaza, right? And so I think having that clarity is really important. But anyway, I think that symbolically, South Africa bringing this case before the ICJ is important because it's showing that the tides have completely turned. And if we look at the South African case of apartheid, it took decades and decades of organizing for there to be a global movement, and of course, Cuba, right?
Right.
For apartheid to finally fall. And so, to make a short story long, as I always do, I think that it's important symbolically, and it's an important opening for organizing. I think it might also reflect the sort of I don't want to say the ineffectiveness, but the sort of the limits of our organizing, right? Because we've
Mm.
been protesting and marching and calling our senators and representatives and shutting things down and petitioning the United Nations in various ways. And the genocide, the war intensified genocide has been ongoing. And so I think that, at least in the context of the United States, that shows the weakness of labor, the weakness of our left-wing movements,
Mm. Mhm.
and that we have to constantly appeal to these forms of liberalism to try to get any modicum of justice. And so I think that it gives us a moment to sort of reflect and really think about, like, what does a revolutionary solution actually look like? And that is what we need, obviously. So yeah, so that's sort of what I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah, and what you said about, everything being laid bare, it's really interesting that if people are really interested in the truth, I'm looking at this article in AP about the testimony today from Israel, and how even in The Hague, in their testimony, they're still using the lies about Hamas burning people alive,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Hamas killing 1,200 people, Hamas mass raping people and all that kind of stuff. These lies have been thoroughly debunked. But
Right.
the fact that, now I'm not sure how these proceedings go. I'm not sure if they're like the true crime shows that I watch way too many of on television, where the accused are in court, and then the defense gets to say something and the prosecution gets to say something, and then there's a rebuttal allowed. I'm not sure if the attorneys for South Africa will be allowed to rebut the claims of Israel, but just the fact that in The Hague, in court, um, first of all, Germany said now it wants to intervene in the proceedings on Israel's behalf. And it was the German government spokesman, Stefan Hibestreit. I guess I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I'm not really all that concerned about it. Um, he said, quote, Hamas terrorists brutally attacked, tortured, killed, and kidnapped innocent people in Israel. Since then, Israel has been defending itself against the inhumane attack by Hamas. They also said that they tortured children in front of parents. These are the attorneys for Israel who said this. Parents in front of children, burned people, including infants alive, and systematically raped and mutilated scores of women, men, and children. All of that absolutely proven to be untrue. It's been proven that it was the Israeli army that fired indiscriminately on the people at the music festival. First of all, and I'm never going to not ask this question, how do you have a music festival or a dance festival next to a concentration camp? But okay. So it has been proven that Israel killed most of the people at the dance festival, that Israel has a whole directive where they will sacrifice their own people and soldiers to ensure that hostages aren't taken. So they killed many people in the kibbutzes by bombing and firing indiscriminately on the kibbutzes. And we all know that the purpose for Hamas taking hostages is to negotiate the release of Palestinians who have been kidnapped for decades. So that is the only reason they take hostages, to negotiate with Israel to release their people. And over again, these people who have been released by Hamas have said they treated us well. They're so all of this stuff has been debunked. But here you have, the attorneys for the settler colonial state, Zionist apartheid state of Israel, in supposedly the highest international court, repeating the lies. And if there is no rebuttal to the lies, what does that do to the narrative that so many people have worked so hard to rebut? What does this, legitimization of these lies, what does that do to our fight against them?
Again, I think on the one hand, people who believe this drivel, it just shows the extent to which people are propagandized. But it's kind of like, imagine this. Imagine there was somebody in a community that committed a terrible crime against one individual or two or three, right? And then let's say this person who committed this crime, their grandmother gave them shelter. And so then do we say that is legitimate for the police to go in to arrest or murder the person who committed the crime, to murder the grandmother, to murder everybody else in that neighborhood and 60 adjacent neighborhoods, to bomb every library, school, medical facility, grocery store in that neighborhood, right? And then to talk about perhaps other crimes that this person did or did not commit. Like, that's the sort of logic of this, right? And I think if we take that scenario, we would say that that's absolutely not the case. If we even believe in liberal jurisprudence, if we believe in law and order, if we believe in any of this stuff that us radicals don't even necessarily believe in, right? But even if we hold like liberals to that, it doesn't make any sense. It's absolutely inhumane, right? And so even if Hamas had, which we know they didn't, but even if they had murdered, let's say 1,200 people, that justifies the murder of 25,000 plus people, half of which are children.
Right.
So I think that to your question, I think that what it conveys is the absolute barbarism of this situation. That if you are the colonized, the racialized, and the subjected, there are no rules. There is no rule of law that pertains to you. You have no liberties. You have no rights that imperialists are bound to respect. And that any struggle that you wage, whether it's in the service of liberation, of retribution, or retaliation, that legitimates extraordinary violence, not only against you, but against anybody who looks like you, anybody adjacent to you. And that is the logic that pervades. And I think that we all need to be mindful of that, because that is the US is a declining empire. It is an empire in free fall. It is engaging in classic imperial overreach with trying to back Ukraine, trying to back Israel, now waging this war trying to wage this war against Iran, the situation that's happening with Taiwan. It's a classic imperial overreach, and it is the racialized and oppressed people here who are going to bear the brunt of that. So we would take, we would, you know, it behoove us to take notice as to what's happened to the Palestinians, because we are likely next to be subjected to these types of punishment and violence, because we have no rights, right? The Dred, you know,
Right.
Dred
That's
Scott, right?
right.
No rights that
Hmm.
the that the white man is bound to respect. Um, so yeah, so I think that on the one hand, it shows a sort of brute monopoly on violence that the ruling class has, that the imperialists have. But on the other hand, I think again it also shows that any claim to democracy, any claim to being the arbiters of peace, democracy, justice, equality, women's rights, etc., is absolute. It's absolute crap. And for those of us, many of us already knew that. Many of us who call ourselves radicals already knew that. But for people who might have believed that previously, hopefully they now see that this is all propaganda.
Yeah, I vacillate between not feeling sorry for people who realize that what we've been saying all along about there not being a democracy in this country, there not being free speech, there not being actual freedom of assembly in this country. We told you that all of that was foolishness and garbage, because look at what they do to us every time we try to exercise these so-called rights. And I honestly vacillate between feeling sorry for those people and, having the open revolutionary arms and saying, okay, come on, let's really talk about what's going on now that you really see it, and just being like, well, we told you, and just going on about. But that's not the revolutionary response, because we all were unaware of what this system really was at some point. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
keep that in mind, that for people who are waking up right now to what this system truly is not, that all of these declarations of, the greatest democracy on earth, and, this great ideal of free speech that only the United States honors, right? We're always told that. The facade it's crumbled now. It's completely gone, or at least it should be, to many more people. And they're going to have to be welcomed into organization. There, that's just, and that's a really, as an organizer, I'm just going to be honest, that's a really difficult thing to do when those are the people who have been telling you all along that you're overacting, that you're doing it wrong, that you shouldn't be doing it this way, and oh, it's not so bad. So, I mean, how do you feel about that? Because I vacillate between that one. Like, I know you really want me to make you feel better and, pat you on the back and say, there, it'll be okay. But we've been telling you it's not going to be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
you've just been making it harder for us to get us closer to okay. I mean, how do you deal with that? Do you have those same feelings? Or is it just me being petty? Because
No, this is why I really love and admire people like you and Erica Keynes and Ajamu Baraka, Sean, like people who really are truly dedicated, like seasoned organizers, because y'all have to contend with that. I'm an academic who is adjacent to organizing. I can't, what up, maybe, adjacent to activism, because to me, I take seriously when Walter Rodney says things like, he talks about people who are like, so academics or even white people who are enemy of the people until proven otherwise. And so
Mhm.
just because you have ceased to engage in your willful ignorance, I don't think that necessarily means that you uncritically are accepted into organizing, because, people can come to selective consciousness. So they might come to consciousness around Palestine, but if you don't make the connections to the indigenous
Right.
folks here, to the internal colonies here, to what's happening in Haiti and Sudan, to the potentialities of what's happening in the Sahel, then it's like, we don't believe you. You need more people. And so I don't know. There's in this moment, I think it's easy for liberalism, for left, so-called left liberalism or radical liberalism, to conceal itself as real struggle. And I am skeptical of that. At the
Mhm.
same time, that I think that we need skeptics like myself, and I think we need the open arm revolutionaries that you're speaking about, because I do think that there are some people who sincerely are wanting to struggle for a better world at this moment. Um, but then there are those who want to be part of the upsurge now.
Mm.
Um, they want to have a sort of proximity to righteousness now. And having proximity to righteousness is not the same thing as coming to consciousness, because these are people
Right.
who, you know, are crying every day, according to them, about what's happening in Palestine, but would not you know, piss on fire to put a homeless person out here.
Mm, mm-hmm,
They don't
mm-hmm,
care about their communities here, right? And it
mm-hmm.
starts here, like for you to, just like I say, courage is a muscle, like actual revolutionary care. So love is like radical responsibility starts here. It starts with the dispossessed people around you. And if you don't care about those people, it's it can be performative to care about what's happening elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
Or abdication of responsibility, really, to care about what's happening elsewhere and not care about those same forms of domination and dispossession that are happening right around you. So I'm probably even more curmudgeonly about it than you, because at least you're having, like, you know, the back and forth. I'm just like, I don't know.
I mean, and that's real. I mean, I think that too often people mysticize organizing or organizers, you know, and they think that it's this, you know, it's this sexy thing that is just so appealing, and it's so easy for us to do. No, you got to deal with personalities and people's levels of consciousness, which are not going to be where yours are, and you have to deal with your own lack of patience and your
Mm-hmm,
own little
mm-hmm.
pettiness. And it's and in these really critical times, because I feel like these are critical times, like 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 it feels like the world is about to change on a dime, right? But I also understand that that change may not happen in the next 5 years. It
Mm-hmm.
may, we may be on this precipice for a while, and then when it finally changed, it's like, oh well, you know. But in this moment, I think there are some things that, because of the direness of the situation, some of those things I think we have to kind of put aside if we can, because
Mm-hmm.
I do think there are times, like in these unprecedented protests, that, and I've never seen anything like this before. I don't think in my lifetime, just the unrelenting every day all over the world, people in the streets demanding a change in this situation to literally stop a genocide. Um, there have been moments where, you know, we're at a protest, and then you think someone is there for the same reason, and then they come out with actual anti-Semitic and racist things, you know, so that there is that um alertness, there is that skepticism that we have to maintain to keep our people safe. And in thinking about that, I've been thinking about, like, the idea of growing the left, which we've been talking about for the past 2 years, and how we grow the left, who we grow the left with, who we don't grow the left with. I don't know how you have been assessing the status of the left right now in this moment. Um, because it seems to me like everything we've been saying, we can absolutely fill the left with the ranks of people of like mind, of like principles, and not jeopardize our people's safety or our principles. And we can be, you know, quite powerful. And do you think that we're at that moment where we're actually seeing that, or do you think that there is still a lot of work to do to kind of disabuse people of this idea that we can all just kumbaya and fix the system? Because quite frankly, everybody who says they're anti-war or you know, anti-occupation, they're not anti-capitalist, they're not anti-imperialist, and they're usually not even anti-racist. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, how have you been assessing this moment, seeing the protests, seeing the left kind of seeming to coalesce around an issue and being open to um, making the connections? Can it last? Is it real? Where do we go from here?
You know, Zora Neale Hurston said there are years that have questions, and then there are years that have answers, something along these lines. And these are
Mhm.
just years of questions, I suppose. I don't know that there are any real answers because things are still unfolding. What I think is that everybody doesn't have to be a leftist. Everybody doesn't have to be a radical or revolutionary. And the problem is when you are not that, but claim to be so. But it's okay not to be one. I
Mhm.
think that the best we can hope for now is that whatever it is that your politic is, if it's rooted in justice, do your thing. Because things are really, really bad right now, right? And we
Yeah.
need all
Yeah.
hands on deck. And I think that some of the problems arise when people try to inhabit or claim a politic that is simply not theirs,
Mhm.
because then that forces radicals and revolutionaries to divert attention to like calling this out. So for example, one example of this is like Sean King apparently got kicked off Instagram. We don't care.
That's what I was
We
about to
don't
say.
care. Real revolutionaries don't care, but there's so much back and forth between Palestinian folks um and Black people primarily about like he is a grifter, he's this, he's that. And so and even even the Palestinian community seems to be divided. Some are like we need Sean King because he's lifting up the Palestinian struggle, and others are like we have to have a broader view of this where people are capitalizing off of it's the same with like I think the guy's name is Jackson Hinkle. Even Candace Owens said
Yeah.
some good things, and people are
Mhm.
trying to claim these people, and it's like that is a problem. That's problematic. That's how people hijack and co-opt radical movement. And so to me, it's enough for Sean to just stay in his lane, right? And
Mhm.
lift, and we don't need to give him more credence. We don't need to act like somebody called him Malcolm and Martin rolled into one, and I just had to roll my
Oh
eyes.
no.
But
Not before Martin Luther King's day. Oh no.
listen, and so I just had to, and so I think that people who believe, for example, in a two-state solution and that there could be good Zionists, which some people are saying, even there has been at least one Palestinian talking head that said this. Stay in your lane, do your thing, whatever your thing
Mhm.
is. So you're going to call your senator, you're going to do these things, right? For the radicals and revolutionaries, we don't need to go back and forth about whether or not we condemn Hamas. We don't need to do any of that because we understand the role of violence in revolutionary struggle. And so all of that to say, I think that's what I think needs to happen. Just the least we can do right now is clarity. Is have some clarity about what our politics are, what our stakes are, and what we're willing to give up. Like who we want to be responsible to. And I think that because everything is so commodified, everything turns into a money making or a clout chasing operation that people are feigning leftism or radicalism or revolutionary politics when that's simply not them. And it becomes worse because we on the left can be sort of self-righteous and condemning everybody who's not a revolutionary. We don't need
Right.
to do that either. I
Mhm.
do think we need to be vigilant about and clear about what that is, but we don't need to condemn people who are not that, and just be clear like you do you. So that's what I think. And do I think that the left is getting stronger? I'm not sure if the left is getting stronger. But we are weak. We can't do we have not been able to stop 90 plus days of
Yeah.
genocide. We're not organized enough. We can protest and we can do all of these things that are sanctioned more or less by the state, but like
Mm.
we are not strong. Like we are not moving the needle, right? I think that there are other things that are moving the needle. I think that it is the very revolutionary violence that people are condemning that is moving the needle. I think it's Yemen,
Right.
um, stopping ships that is moving the needle. And so I think that we also need to be self-reflective and humble about what we're actually capable of and where we are. Somebody that a non-USian said, the US left is basically a glorified reading group.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's incorrect.
Yeah. I mean, when you said it, it was like, well, I don't even think I can be offended at that because Yeah, and that's something we absolutely have to continue to work on. Thanks so much for joining us this Friday evening. This is Darker Than Blue. I am your host, Jacquie Luqman, usually here with your other host, Sean, the voice Blackman, but he's doing what good organizers do, and he is working tonight to to organize tomorrow's very important National March on Washington for Gaza. It's tomorrow, Saturday, January 13th at 1 o'clock p.m. They will convene at 1 o'clock at Freedom Plaza. That has been a change, not the National Mall. And this is an event that is being put together by the American Muslim Task Force for Palestine, with which the Answer Coalition is a national partner. So there are lots and lots of organizations putting this together. There are buses leaving from several locations. You can get more information on travel to the march tomorrow at the website marchforgaza.org. Buses are already listed from Connecticut, Illinois, Michigan, Missouri, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. See you tomorrow, folks. And I continue to be joined by Dr. Charisse Burden-Stelly. That is the lovely and knowledgeable voice that you hear. I'm actually surprised you have any energy after just
I know. I'm getting some of your revolutionary energy is infusing me because we're fighting for our lives.
I know. Just and congratulations to both of you. Just it's just, going through all of my health issues. I hate that I couldn't really celebrate with you, but I was so happy when you told me that you were pregnant, and I'm just so happy for you all. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So we were talking about liberalism, and what we kind of do with a liberal perspective on revolutionary moments, because I can't look at this as anything other than a revolutionary moment, exactly like the revolutionary moment that was the fight against South African apartheid. So of course South Africa would take Israel to The Hague. Of course, who knows better about apartheid than South Africa?
Well, African Americans
and us. And yeah, that's I want to get to that too, but let me stick a pin in that. But a part of this kind of liberalism that is such a danger to revolutionary moments, I think, happened at Mother Emanuel Church a few days ago.
Yeah.
And you can't see it, but she's rolling her eyes. And I know. But I have plenty to say about that. But I want to hear what you have to say about that incident, the fact that it even happened, not that the response to the protesters, but that the church was the site of a campaign speech by Joseph. Let me stop. What did you think when you saw this all unfold?
I mean, listen, African Americans are a perplexing bunch because and I use the term African American deliberately, right? Because some of these African Americans really believe with all of their might. Number one, they might push back on being called African, so Black Americans, I suppose. They really believe in this America thing, right? They really believe in this America thing. And Trump is really the best thing that's happened to the ruling class in that he has stymied basically all protests against anything but him. And people are so afraid of another Trump presidency and have so much in their minds that Trump is the embodiment of all evil. Similar with Netanyahu, really, right? That if we get, people in Israel now saying, if we get rid of Netanyahu, everything will be fine. It's like, no, if you get rid of the settlers, so we can't, these two things go together. Likewise, it's not just Trump, it's the policies that he enacted, but really that he just carried forth, right? Because we know it's under the Obama administration that drone warfare really was solidified.
Right.
Libya was under Obama. the intensification of violence and brutality at the border is happening under Biden.
Mhm.
This genocide is being funded by Biden, going around Congress, right? And so I think the reason why Biden got the welcome that he did at that church is, number one, those are Americans, or people who believe themselves to be so. Secondly, because South Carolina has become this site of struggle, right? So Biden already said that because of what Clybum was able
Yeah.
was able to do for him, right? The last presidential during the last presidential election. But I'm not at all surprised that and Biden's a race hustler. So it makes complete sense that he would stop at like a prestigious, sort of prominent Black church that also was a site of a terrorist attack. Almost 10 years ago now. So he, so it's race hustling. It's also, taking advantage and trivializing a racially traumatic moment for Black people. And then the church, as we know, is the strongest institution in the Black community. Less strong now, but historically the strongest institution in the Black community. So it makes a lot of sense that he was there. It's very disappointing that folks were chanting 4 more years and trying to basically paint these protesters as, subversives and racists and all this other stuff. It's disappointing, but it's not surprising. This is why we have to pay attention to intra-racial class dynamics. This is why we need to pay attention to what those politics are looking like. This is why we can't root for everybody Black.
Right.
Because a good portion of those Black folks really believe in empire. They really believe in the military. They really believe in the U.S. project. Is the but-for logic. They believe in all of this but-for racism, as if you can separate the two. And so I wasn't surprised that it happened. I was disgusted by the discourse. The anti-Blackness discourse has us in the chokehold. And I think to understand anti-Black racial oppression, I write about it in my book. It's really important, but to use that as a bludgeon for any other form of logic, any sort of interrogation of politics is really, really detrimental. And is another form of race hustling. And so the dumbest tweet that I read, and I feel bad because it's somebody that whatever is a follower or something, but like, saying that our elders were traumatized, right? That this protest traumatized our elders. And I said, these are folks that probably lived through some aspect of Jim Crow,
right,
redlining, the prison industrial complex, et cetera, et cetera. We're not a feeble people. And so there's a way that trauma has become the sort of pop psychology thing, where things that offend you or things that might hurt your feelings or make you mad are traumatizing
traumatic.
Yeah. Right. And people are weaponizing that psychological language. It's like, no, they probably was mad that they mans got disrupted, but this was not traumatizing. Right. And to say that is to make it seem as if these protesters were terrorists or, were actually committing some form of violence, as opposed to contesting violence. Right, standing up for people who are being brutalized and exterminated and being blown to bits. So it's all very embarrassing as a Black person, to be honest.
Yeah, and I gotta say, to add on that, I was even more embarrassed as a Christian. I'm just sitting here going, that is not Jesus. Y'all are not Jesus. This is not it. I mean, this is the same. Supposedly, we Christians are supposed to be worshiping the same Savior, allegedly, who literally went into the temple with a whip and was running mugs out of the temple, beating them and flipping over their tables full of money because they were cheating the people in buying their offering, things, their little offering, animals for offerings or whatever. And so, Jesus has this righteous anger. We're supposed to know this. We're supposed to know these things. He has this righteous anger where he goes into the temple, wrecking ship over a lot less than genocide. What better place is there to bring this issue than to the house of worship, where our alleged savior is supposed to be on behalf of the oppressed? So it was just really, it was embarrassing. It was insulting that these folks, first of all, online, they mischaracterized the demonstrators. They're like, oh, they were all white people. No, it was a young Black woman. It was a young Palestinian woman. It was a young Jewish dude. But they just focused on the two white looking people, and And the fact that they dismissed the reason these people were there, and they chose instead to defend, not even just, defending the church being sacred, which was stupid considering the history of that church in particular, with Denmark Vesey, planning a revolution, planning a revolt, from that church. You know what I mean? And it's like, how, which Jesus are y'all talking about? Because I don't know which Jesus y'all talking about, because the Jesus I thought that y'all worshiped would be enraged at the church being silent in what's going on, not just in Palestine, but what goes on in our streets right here in this country. But you raised a great point. That is a reflection of the class contradictions within our community and within the church community, because we're not talking about the same Black church that were, funding part of the civil rights movement. Even if they couldn't do it publicly, they were kind of doing it in secret, bailing people out of jail, um having their places of worship be meeting places for revolutionaries and radicals and that kind of stuff. And that wasn't that long ago, but the church isn't even that anymore. And even then, Doctor, it wasn't even all of the churches then, because there were plenty of churches then who were like, no, we can't, we're not dealing with those crazy Negroes trying to stir up trouble. But there were more people of faith, more institutions of faith who recognized it as their spiritual responsibility to get involved because people were being oppressed. What changed? How I can't figure out how people in the modern Black church do not see what's going on in Palestine as connected to what happened in South Africa, as connected to what goes on in our communities. What happened? What happened to these folks?
Well, I think as a group, I love my people, but Black Americans don't understand history and they don't understand the international situation.
Mm.
And that is a function, I think, of many things of our education system. It's a function of the extreme duress under which we continually operate, where we're just literally like fighting to survive, just their life day in and day out. It has to do with the advent of mass edutainment and distraction with social media and more television and streaming and anything than any other time in history. It has to do with the correlation of forces. And I think that we're entering sort of a different historical moment with respect to that, with Palestine and with what's happening in the Sahel, et cetera. But, I think in the 1960s and 1970s, imperialism was on its back foot. There really was a feeling that we could win. There really was a sort of upsurge globally in radical and revolutionary forces. And now we see some of that, but we also see the global rise of fascism, of right-wing movement that's probably more pervasive and more strong. And so I think it's and I think that integration as a class project was pretty successful here. So I do think that there was some redistribution of wealth upwardly for a certain tiny group of Black people. I think that the Black community is more fragmented and dispersed than it was in the 1960s and 1970s. There's a sort of low tide of movement. So I think there's a lot of reasons why the church doesn't have to be responsive to particular orientations and ideological tendencies in the community. But yeah, I do think that just we are notoriously bad. It's not just Black people, but I'm talking about Black people because that's what we talk about. Are just notoriously bad when it comes to foreign policy and the international situation and making those types of connections. And race becomes the only politic that we tend to have, which is why we then can use that to misrecognize what was happening with these young protesters and only point to the white folks or only point to, how dare you interrupt a Black space, as if every space in this country hasn't been disrupted in one way or another by by pro-Palestine protesters. People's dinners are getting disrupted. People's
Mm-hmm.
houses are getting,
Yep.
are come to Penn Station. So it's not so to make it seem like the Black church or only
Right.
Black,
They
Black.
specifically targeted the Black church to disrespect Black people.
It's wholly disingenuous, and it's that's Malcolm X would have called these people handkerchief heads.
That's what I called them the other day. Actually, I was sitting there watching that video. Oh, these handkerchief heads. Oh no. So just the fact, I thought that just the fact that this was not a church service, right? That's the thing that I think people when people are like, oh, the sanctity of the Black church. I'm like, but this wasn't Big Mama's going home, her homecoming service. This was not a church service. This was not Sunday school. It was a political speech. Which to me, I mean, they're fair game anywhere. I don't care where the speech is. A political speech is fair game for people who have something to say to the politician. But I really felt like the people in the church, which I found out later, some of the church members who are supportive of the Palestinian Liberation Movement were actually not allowed into their own church because of these so-called security reasons, because this whole thing was apparently organized with members of the church. And so I can't quite figure out if it was other members of the church leadership in collusion with the Biden security team who were like, no, you can't let those people in. I don't care if they are your church members. Or if it was really, or if this really was a case of, these people in this church not wanting to be disrespectful to Joe Biden really chose empire over humanity in this case.
Joe Biden owes us $600. So when he pays me my $600, then I will afford him some humanity or some whatever. Like Joe Biden owes us $20,000 of student debt relief. Joe Biden owes us a build back basic bill. Joe Biden owes when Joe Biden when he pays what he owes, then he can get some whatever his feelings and his dumb speech can be respected. Well, he probably forgot 3/4 of it anyway. Yeah. So that is just, but I mean, to the point, this is part of how anti-radicalism operates. And so part of what I write about in my book, for example, is one of the ways that anti-communism works is through societal self-regulation. And so that's precisely what happened with whatever the scenario was in that church. It's that what anti-communism and just as an offshoot of broader anti-radicalism does is like you start to purge the people who either have a particular politic or who couldn't even be accused of such. And so that leaves you with a paltry, like anemic group who are just willing to go with the status quo. And so some of the most able organizers, the most ethical and hardworking people get pushed out because of this anti-radical sentiment. And so as we say, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And it's not exactly like the different Red Scare moment. It's very similar, but it's not exactly the same because the accusation of anti-Semitism, for example, is operating a little bit differently. It has the same effect. But this is precisely what it does when you start to chop off the left and legitimate and participate in the abrogation of their rights and their liberties and their ability to participate in society, then you're hoisting yourself on your own petard. And this is precisely why during that 2020 moment, right, left liberals and even some so-called radicals were, chomping at the bit to get people fired. And they were dancing with glee and cha-cha sliding in their raggedy Uggs with vigor, getting, the woman who basically, race baited the man who was bird watching, her getting fired, and all these people getting fired. People celebrated that, right? And I was very skeptical of that because it's like, listen, any punishment that's meted out against the right will always redound back to the left because this country and its institutions, including the university, corporate America, or whatever, are notoriously hostile to the left. And so, and also that's economic terrorism. We should never be
Right.
celebrating that people cannot make a living or earn a livelihood because they are egregious. If that was the case, nobody would have a job because
Right.
humans are terrible.
We're
But
all
anyway,
terrible.
right. And we see it coming back in stunning fashion. And so when people talk about like, this is the woke mob getting hoisted on its own petard. Now, of course, I wouldn't put it exactly in those terms, but it is just the boomerang effect. And so I think that we need to have this sort of individualized targeting of people to lose their jobs and lose their livelihood and to not be able to participate in spaces. That can't be what we're calling for when we're organizing against wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
Because the right will always, well, not all, they don't have to, but currently they will out organize us. They have more money than us. They have more access than us because this is a right-wing country. And so, back to what I said before, like Trump has really done a number for liberal, for really anybody but the most egregious right-wing folks, because they're above critique somehow because they're not Trump. And I think that has set us back, set our movements back. It has set our analysis back really, really far, to the point where we feel like we have to protect a dirtbag like Joe Biden, who is doing so many of the very things that we were up in arms about under Trump, and even worse.
Right. I mean, he's funding and arming a genocide right now.
Literally.
Quite literally. And now that you brought up Trump, what do you feel about, the moves to get him disqualified from being on the ballots in certain states? This to me sounds and feels exactly like that moment you were just describing. Like, we should not be all that invested in getting people fired. Like, we should not be invested in getting Donald Trump to not be on the ballot in this country, because isn't that what they do to third party candidates all the time? So why would we be involved in that?
Well, to the extent that it's already happening to third party candidates, it's like, well, just you keep that same energy. Then, it's like, this is not my politics. It's not like I'm spending time rooting for this one way or the other, but it's like, if this is what we doing, might as well try it with this person. But again, I think that what that logic is that he's somehow worse than Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, right? And again, it's putting all of it's like imbuing him with this unparalleled evil,
right?
That then again allows every other politician to evade criticism or critique or be, or any sort of, it makes them look good by comparison, because Trump is supposed to be this singular evil.
Yeah, the devil incarnate, basically.
And I mean, I will say, I do think the thing about a Trump presidency is that he is so petty and arbitrary that I do think, and he actually has used the power of his office to do whatever he wanted. And it's really beguiling that nobody else will do that. It's like Trump has shown that you can literally do whatever you want.
Right.
And so that, I think, is the danger, because he just rules by fiat, right? I do think that is dangerous, because I'm Black and I'm a Black studies professor and I want to still have a job. So I do think that there are certain dangers. At the same time, that I don't think that means we need to be bludgeoned and bullied into voting for Joe Biden. Joe Biden needs to pull a LBJ and be like, I will not run for another term. Like, I realize that I'm a scrub, I suck, I'm a dirtbag. People are not messing with me. So for the sake of my party, I'm gonna let another loser run. Like, so that's on him.
Yeah. So, in the last couple of minutes we've got left, I wonder how you feel all of this means for people in the movement, because we don't know our history. We're not good at learning from the organizing of the past and learning that we have won these battles before. We just need to be organized to what would you say to people, all these people about to come out tomorrow who will be involved in other organizing, the Black Alliance for Peace. We always got something going on. So, what do you say to people to keep them encouraged in what feels like an extension of that long durée of Black scare, Red scare, racialized capitalism that you talk about in your book? even though it's operating in a different way, using anti-Semitism as the bludgeon now instead
Mhm.
of communism, there's still that bludgeon. The bludgeon is still there, and that bludgeon could scare a lot of people away who otherwise would be like, yes, I want this system to change, but quite frankly, I'm afraid of the system. you know.
Well, they can't kill us all. They can't throw everybody in jail. And
Uh-huh.
that's really all you can say. It's like at some point, and I've said this many times before, at some point we have to stop negotiating the terms of our immiseration. Who
Mm-hmm.
knows where that, and sometimes we're forced to that point, but organizing means we're being proactive in terms of not, we're making that a choice. So it's just like how people become socialist or more collective in times of scarcity and dire situations like COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But the point of socialism is for that to be a way of life. And
Right.
it's not just a function of being of duress, right? And so I think that likewise, confronting the system not out because everybody's homeless, right? And nobody has any food and nobody has any resources, but rather that being an active choice, that being a commitment, a commitment to oneself, but also to others, right? An act of relationality. I think that that's the best that we can do. And like it starts with, like we have to take care of each other. We have to start thinking more collectively, right? There's yeah, so I think that the way that we encourage each other is to work together. We have to love each other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
again, I think about love, I'm talking about love, not arrow, so don't join an organization to go mac on people. I mean like love as radical
Please don't.
responsibility,
Please don't do that.
and to know that we will win. Because even during McCarthy, the height of McCarthyism,
Mm-hmm.
we continued.
That's right.
Du Bois and Paul Robeson and Louise Thompson Patterson, Alpheus Hunton, they continued. And so we have a responsibility and we have the opportunity to, this is our moment, right? To be agents of history.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Charisse Burden-Stelly, for being with us today. This is Jacquie Luqman. You have been listening to Darker Than Blue here on WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C. Join us again next Friday for another fantastic guest. This is your number one source for struggle, socialism, and soul. Thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned for News Views with Garland Nixon. Peace, y'all.
Bye.
Great show, ladies.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, man.
Y'all have a good weekend.
All
You
right,
too.
you
Bye
too.
bye.
Thank you, sweetie.